ladies and gentlemen. You ever been in a season where everything feels like it's shifting? Like life's got you on this wild ride and you're just holding on, trying to make sense of it all? See, sometimes we think that help comes in obvious ways, like a big neon sign flashing in front of us telling us what's next. But the truth is, help doesn't always look like what we expected. It shows up in whispers, in redirections, in moments that stretch us beyond what we thought we could handle. You might be in a place where it feels like everything is falling apart, like the plans you had are slipping right through your fingers. But what if I told you that what looks like an ending is really just the beginning of something bigger? What if I told you that those closed doors are actually divine protection? That the delay is not denial, but a setup for something greater? You see, sometimes help doesn't come in the way we want, but it always comes in the way we need. It's when things start shifting, one of the first things you'll notice is that certain people begin to fade away. I know it hurts. I know you thought they were supposed to be part of your journey forever, but sometimes separation is necessary for elevation. You can't take everyone with you where you're going, and that's not rejection, it's refinement. Because when you're being prepared for something bigger, some relationships, some connections, some situations can't go with you. It's not personal, it's purposeful. And then there's that moment when you feel the discomfort, that inner stirring that won't let you settle. You try to stay in the same place, but something inside of you knows you were made for more. That discomfort, that's not a problem. It's a push. It's a reminder that you were never meant to stay stagnant. Growth is uncomfortable. Transition is unsettling. But staying where you don't belong, that's unbearable. When you feel that discomfort, don't fight it. Lean into it, because that's the very thing that's pushing you toward your destiny. And let's talk about those delays. You ever been in a season where it feels like no matter how hard you try, nothing is moving? Like you're putting in the effort, you're showing up, you're doing the work, but everything feels stuck? Let me tell you something. Delay is not denial. Delay is preparation. Sometimes the very thing you're waiting for is waiting for you to grow into the person who can handle it. Because what good is a blessing if you're not ready for it? What good is a door opening if you don't yet have the strength to walk through it? That delay is not there to frustrate you, it's there to fortify you. And then, out of nowhere, you start seeing unexpected opportunities pop up. You weren't looking for them, you weren't planning for them, but somehow they find you. That's no accident. That's alignment. That's the right doors opening at the right time. But here's the thing, you've got to be ready to step into them. You've got to stop questioning whether you're good enough, whether you're qualified, whether you have what it takes. Because when that opportunity comes, it's not about whether you feel ready, it's about whether you're willing. Willing to step out of fear. Willing to believe that if the opportunity is in front of you, then you are more than capable of walking into it. And then there's a transformation in you. The way you start thinking differently, the way you start seeing things from a new perspective, the way what used to bother you no longer has the same effect. That's growth, that's healing, that's you stepping into a new version of yourself. And sometimes that transformation happens so subtly, you don't even notice it until one day you realize you're not reacting the way you used to. You're not carrying the same weight. You're not stuck in the same patterns. And that's proof that you are being prepared for something greater. And then there's that undeniable sense of peace, even in the middle of uncertainty, even when you don't have all the answers, even when you're still waiting for things to make sense. That peace, that's not a coincidence, that's a confirmation. That's the kind of peace that comes when you know deep down, even when things don't look like they're working, they actually are. Even when you don't understand the process, you trust that there's a purpose. There comes a moment in life when the people you thought would always be there start to fade away. The friendships that once felt unbreakable begin to loosen their grip. The relationships you poured so much of yourself into no longer feel the same. The places you once felt comfortable in start to feel unfamiliar. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing that something is wrong with you. That maybe you did something to push them away. That maybe you're being abandoned, overlooked, or forgotten. But what if I told you that this isn't rejection, it's refinement? That the very people, situations, and places you feel slipping from your grasp were never meant to be permanent. that the shifting and the breaking and the separation are all part of the process of preparing you for what's next. See, we get attached. We get attached to people who make us feel safe. We get attached to spaces that feel familiar. We get attached to versions of ourselves that no longer fit who we're becoming. And that attachment makes us resist change even when change is necessary. Even when growth requires letting go, because the truth is not everyone can go with you where you're headed. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people are only meant to be in your life for a season. And when their purpose in your journey is complete, they begin to drift. Not because they don't love you, not because they don't care, but because their role in your story is over. And I know that's hard to accept, because when you love deeply, when you invest your heart into connections, the idea of separation feels like loss. It feels like something is being taken from you. It feels like something is breaking. But what if I told you that the breaking is actually a blessing? That the people who are leaving, the doors that are closing, the shifts that are happening are not meant to harm you but to prepare you? Because sometimes the very thing you're holding on to is the very thing that's keeping you from stepping into what's next. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew deep down that something was off, that a relationship was draining you more than it was feeding you? That a space you once felt at home in was now making you feel small? That something in your spirit was whispering, this is no longer where you belong, but instead of listening, you stayed, you held on. You convinced yourself that if you just tried harder, if you just gave more, if you just ignored the discomfort, maybe things would go back to the way they used to be, but they never did, because you weren't meant to stay there. And so the shift begins. Sometimes it happens slowly. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly start to feel forced. The people who used to check in on you don't reach out as much. The invitations stop coming. The energy shifts, and you're left wondering what changed. Other times it happens suddenly. People walk away without explanation. Doors slam shut without warning. Relationships crumble in an instant. And you're left feeling blindsided, questioning what went wrong. But what if I told you that nothing went wrong, that what you're experiencing isn't punishment but preparation? Because if you could see what's ahead of you, if you could see the opportunities, the growth, the healing, the blessings that are waiting on the other side of this season, you wouldn't be so desperate to hold on to what's leaving. You would understand that every exit is making room for something better. That the people who are walking away are actually making space for the ones who are meant to walk in. That the closed doors are redirecting you towards something greater. Because if you can see what's ahead of you, if you can see the opportunities, the growth, the healing, the blessings that are waiting on the other side of this season, you wouldn't be so desperate to hold on to what's leaving. You would understand that every exit is making room for something better, that the people who are walking away are actually making space for the ones who are meant to walk in, that the closed doors are redirecting you towards something greater. But I get it. It's hard to trust that in the moment. It's hard to let go of the familiar even when you know it's no longer serving you. It's hard to embrace separation when all you feel is loss. But what if you shifted your perspective? What if instead of seeing it as rejection, you saw it as refinement? What if instead of seeing it as an ending, you saw it as an elevation? What if instead of mourning what's leaving, you started preparing for what's coming? Because here's the thing about growth, it requires space. It requires room to stretch, to expand, to become. And sometimes the reason you feel stuck, the reason you feel like you're suffocating in your current season is because you're trying to grow in a space that was never meant to hold you. You're trying to hold onto relationships that can't support the version of you that you're becoming. You're trying to stay small in a place that was never meant to contain your greatness. And so the shift happens. The separation begins not to hurt you, but to help you. And I know it doesn't feel like help. I know it feels like heartbreak. I know it feels like confusion. But if you hold on, if you trust the process, if you believe that what's happening is happening for your good, you'll begin to see it differently. You'll begin to understand that what's leaving was never meant to stay, that the people who walked away weren't rejecting you, they were releasing you from cycles, from patterns, from attachments that were holding you back. And when you finally embrace that, when you finally stop fighting what's shifting, when you finally stop trying to hold on to what's leaving, you'll feel a freedom you've never known. You'll start to breathe again. You'll start to see clearly again. You'll start to realize that what you thought was a loss was actually a lesson, that what you thought was rejection was actually redirection, that what you thought was breaking you was actually building you. So if you're in a season of separation, if you're watching people walk away, if you're feeling like things are falling apart, don't resist it. Lean into it. Trust that what's happening is happening for a reason. Trust that you're not being punished, you're being positioned. Positioned for something greater, positioned for something better, positioned for the version of yourself that you were always meant to become. There's a moment when you start feeling it deep down, that stirring, that restlessness, that undeniable sense that you don't belong, where you used to fit so easily. The places that once felt like home don't feel the same anymore. The conversations you used to enjoy don't hold your interest. The things that used to satisfy you don't fill you the way they once did. And at first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that maybe you're overthinking, that maybe if you just settle down, if you just focus, if you just keep doing what you've always done, the feeling will go away. But it doesn't. Instead it grows, instead it lingers, instead it keeps showing up in the quiet moments, in the in-between spaces, in the deep places of your heart where you can't pretend you don't feel it. And you start to wonder, why am I so unsettled? Why does it feel like I'm outgrowing my own life? Why does everything I used to love suddenly feel too small for me? That discomfort you feel isn't a mistake. It's not a sign that you've lost your way. It's not something to push down or ignore. It's a push out of what's familiar, a push out of what's easy, a push out of what no longer serves you. Because when you're being called to something greater, you can't stay comfortable. When you're being prepared for more, you can't stay in places that no longer challenge you. When you're being positioned for a higher level, you can't keep shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that no longer align with where you're going. And that's the hard part. Because comfort feels safe. Comfort feels predictable. Comfort feels like home. And stepping away from that, stepping into the unknown, stepping into the unfamiliar, that's terrifying. That's where doubt starts creeping in. That's where you start questioning whether you're making the right choice. That's where you start second-guessing the very thing you know deep down is necessary, because discomfort doesn't feel like progress. Discomfort feels like struggle. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like being stretched in ways you didn't ask for, being pushed beyond what feels manageable. And if you don't recognize it for what it is, you'll think something is wrong. You'll think you're failing. You'll think you need to turn around and go back to where you started, back to what was comfortable, back to what felt familiar, even though you know that place doesn't serve you anymore. But here's the truth. Discomfort isn't a problem. It's a process. It's the necessary stretching that happens when you're transitioning into something bigger. It's the growing pains that come when you're stepping into a new season. It's the evidence that you are evolving, that you are becoming, that you are stepping into the person you were meant to be. And that stretching is never easy. It means letting go of the version of yourself that played small. It means walking away from situations that no longer align with your purpose. It means saying no to things that once felt like everything but are now just distraction. And it means trusting that even though you don't have all the answers, even though you don't see the full picture yet, even though you feel like you're walking into the unknown, there is something waiting for you on the other side of this discomfort. It's in those moments when everything inside of you wants to run back to the familiar that you have to stand firm, that you have to remind yourself that growth was never supposed to be easy, that you have to trust that the discomfort is not here to break you but to build you, because every season of elevation comes with a season of stretching. Every next level requires a new version of you. Every step forward requires leaving something behind. That's what your waiting season is like. Just because you don't see the progress doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because you don't see the results doesn't mean the foundation isn't being built. Just because you feel stuck doesn't mean you are. Growth is happening in the waiting. Strength is being developed in the waiting. Preparation is taking place in the waiting. And I know it's frustrating, and I know you're tired. I know you're wondering how much longer you have to keep waiting. But let me ask you this. If you knew that everything you've been praying for was on the other side of this season, would you still give up? If you knew that the opportunity was coming, that the right people were aligning, that the doors were getting ready to open, would you still walk away? Or would you trust that the process is working, even when you can't see it? Because the truth is, what's meant for you is already yours. The timing is not in your hands, but the preparation is. How you wait matters. What you do in the waiting season matters, because when the door finally opens, you want to be ready to walk through it. You want to be able to sustain the blessing. You want to have the character, the wisdom, and the strength to hold on to what's coming, and that happens in the waiting. So instead of seeing the delay as rejection, see it as preparation. Instead of seeing the stillness as a sign to quit, see it as a call to dig deeper. Instead of letting frustration make you walk away, let it push you to be even more determined, because one day you will look back on this season and realize it was never about stopping you. It was about strengthening you. It was never about holding you back. It was about building you up. It was never about denying you. It was about developing you. And when the time comes, when the moment finally arrives, you will step into it fully prepared, fully equipped, and fully ready for what was always meant to be yours. There's something powerful about feeling at peace, even when everything around you feels uncertain. It doesn't make sense, does it? You're walking through challenges you never expected, facing decisions that seem overwhelming, watching pieces of your life shift and change, and yet somehow you have this quiet knowing inside you, this unshakable feeling that despite how things look on the surface, everything is going to be okay. Maybe you can't explain it, maybe you don't even understand it, but it's there. And that feeling, that deep, settled peace, is not an accident. Most people think peace comes from everything going right, from having all the answers, from knowing exactly what's ahead. But true peace isn't found in certainty. True peace is found in trust. It's found in knowing that even when you don't have the full picture, even when you don't know how things will turn out, even when the path ahead looks unclear, you are exactly where you need to be. That's how you know you're being guided. That's how you know you're being helped. Because real peace doesn't come from having control. It comes from knowing you don't need it. Think about the times in your life when you felt the most anxious, the most overwhelmed, the most lost. Chances are those were the moments when you were trying to figure everything out on your own, when you were trying to force things to happen in your own timing, when you were holding on so tightly to what you thought was best that you didn't leave room for something greater. And what happened? The more you tried to control it, the more things seemed to slip through your fingers. The more you stressed over the outcome, the harder it became to find clarity. The more you fought against the process, the more exhausted you felt. But then there are those moments, the ones where you finally let go, where you stop trying to force things, where you stop running in circles trying to make everything happen on your own, and suddenly things start falling into place. The answers come, the right doors open, the weight lifts off your shoulders, not because you finally figured it all out, but because you finally stopped trying to, because you finally surrendered to the process, because you finally realize that what's meant for you won't miss you. That's why peace is such a powerful sign. It doesn't mean everything is easy. It doesn't mean you won't face challenges. It doesn't mean you won't have moments of doubt. But it does mean that deep down you know you're on the right path, even if it doesn't look the way you expected, even if you don't have all the answers yet, even if the pieces haven't fully come together. There's something inside you that just knows, that whispers keep going, that reminds you you are not alone, that gives you the strength to take the next step, even when you can't see the whole road ahead. And the thing about this kind of piece is that it doesn't make sense to other people. They'll look at you and wonder how you're staying so calm in the middle of the storm. They'll ask why you're not panicking when things aren't going according to plan. They'll question how you're still believing when everything around you says you shouldn't. But that's the beauty of real peace. It's not based on what's happening around you. It's based on what's happening inside you. It's based on a deep trust that even if you don't understand the journey, you are being led somewhere greater. Maybe you're in a season right now where everything feels uncertain. Maybe you're standing at a crossroads, unsure of which way to go. Maybe you're facing a situation that feels bigger than you, heavier than you, more complicated than anything you've ever dealt with before. And maybe part of you is tempted to let fear take over, to let doubt convince you that you won't make it through this, to let stress and anxiety pull you back into old patterns of trying to control everything. But before you let that happen, take a breath, take a moment to notice that quiet peace inside you. Because if you listen closely, it's still there. It's always been there. It's guiding you even when you don't realize it. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It's the presence of trust. And if you've been feeling that peace, even in...
It's not always easy to see in the moment. When you're in the middle of uncertainty, when you're standing in the space between where you are and where you want to be, it's hard to trust that things are working in your favor. It's hard to believe that what feels like a loss is actually a gain. It's hard to hold on to hope when everything around you seems to be falling apart. But if you take a step back, if you really look, you'll start to notice the signs. The moments of alignment, the times when things worked out in ways you couldn't have planned yourself, the evidence that you are being led step by step, even when you don't realize it. It's the unexpected phone call that leads to a new opportunity. It's the person you meet by chance who turns out to play a significant role in your journey. It's the moment when everything seems to be falling apart, only for you to realize later that it was actually falling into place. These are the moments that remind you that you are not wandering aimlessly, that you are not lost, that you are being guided, even in the uncertainty. And maybe right now, you don't see it. Maybe right now, all you see are the closed doors, the delays, the confusion. Maybe right now you feel stuck, unsure of what to do next. But just because you can't see the full picture yet doesn't mean you're not on the right path. Just because things aren't happening as quickly as you want them to doesn't mean they're not happening at all. Sometimes the best things take time. Sometimes the right doors don't open until you're fully ready to walk through them. Sometimes what looks like a detour is actually the exact route you needed to take all along. And when you start to see it that way, when you start to trust that every delay, every redirection, every unexpected change is leading you somewhere important, you stop resisting. You stop fighting the process. You stop trying to force things to happen in your timing. And instead, you start paying attention. You start noticing the small confirmations along the way. You start recognizing the moments of alignment, the times when things come together in ways you never could have orchestrated on your own. Because here's the truth, when you are being guided, nothing is wasted. No experience, no delay, no setback is for nothing. Every moment, every challenge, every closed door is serving a purpose. Even if you don't see it now, one day you will. One day you'll look back and realize that every single thing that happened, even the things that didn't make sense at the time, were all part of a greater plan. One day you'll see that the signs were there all along, leading you exactly where you were always meant to be. There are moments in life when things start to shift, when situations that once felt secure begin to change, when relationships that once felt solid start to fade, when the things you thought you could rely on suddenly feel unstable. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like everything is falling apart. It's easy to feel abandoned, overlooked, forgotten. It's easy to wonder if you're being left behind while everyone else moves forward. But what if, instead of falling apart, things are actually falling into place? What if the things that are leaving your life are making space for something better? What if the changes you didn't see coming are actually setting you up for what's next? Most of the time, we hold on too tightly to what we know. We cling to familiarity. We resist change, even when we know deep down it's necessary. Because even when something isn't right for us, even when we've outgrown a situation, even when we know we're meant for more, letting go is hard. Walking away from what's comfortable is hard. Trusting that the unknown is better than what we're leaving behind is hard. But sometimes, things are removed from our lives not to hurt us, but to help us. Sometimes doors close, not as a punishment, but as protection. Sometimes the very thing we're so afraid to lose is the thing that's been holding us back. Think about the times in your life when something ended and you didn't understand why. Maybe it was a relationship, a job, an opportunity you thought was perfect for you. Maybe at the time it felt like the worst thing that could have happened. But looking back now, can you see how it was actually a blessing? Can you see how losing that thing made space for something better? Can you see how if you had stayed where you were, you never would have grown into the person you are now? It's not always easy to see in the moment. When something is being taken away, when a door closes unexpectedly, when you feel like you're losing something important, it's hard to trust that it's for your good. It's hard to believe that something better is coming when all you feel is loss. But just because you don't understand the reason now doesn't mean there isn't one. Just because you can't see what's ahead doesn't mean it's not going to be better than what you're leaving behind. So many times we ask for growth, but resist the very process that brings it. We ask for new opportunities, but don't want to leave behind the old ones. We ask for elevation, but don't want to be stretched in ways that feel uncomfortable. We pray for change, but don't want to let go of the things that are no longer serving us. But growth requires release. You can't step into what's next while still holding on to what's behind you. You can't receive something new if your hands are still full of what you refuse to let go of. And sometimes, when we won't let go willingly, things are removed for us, not as a punishment, but as a gift. Not as rejection, but as redirect. Because there are places you're meant to go that the things you're holding on to can't go with you. There are levels you're meant to reach that require you to release what's weighing you down. There are blessings waiting for you that can only be received when you make space for them. But in order to see it that way, you have to shift your perspective. Instead of seeing endings as losses, start seeing them as new beginning. Instead of seeing closed doors as rejection, start seeing them as protection. Instead of seeing change as something to fear, start seeing it as something to embrace, because the truth is, you are not being left behind. You are not being forgotten. You are not being abandoned. You are being positioned. You are being prepared. You are being set up for something greater than you could have planned for yourself. Maybe right now, it doesn't feel that way. Maybe right now, all you see is the loss. Maybe right now, all you feel is the uncertainty. But trust that there is more ahead of you than behind you. Trust that what is leaving is making space for something greater. Trust that the changes you didn't expect are leading you exactly where you're meant to be. One day, you'll look back and understand why things had to happen the way they did. One day, you'll see that the things you thought were falling apart were actually falling into place. So if you're in a season where things feel uncertain, where shifts are happening, where you're being stretched and challenged, don't resist it, lean into it. Because what looks like a breaking point is actually a breakthrough. What feels like a loss is actually a lesson. What seems like a delay is actually divine timing. And every step, every moment, every shift is proof that you are not alone in this. You are being guided, you are being prepared, and you are being positioned for something greater than you could have ever imagined.